the big conversation at this moment. Adam Zalo, Professor Adam Zalo, Vice Chairperson, BBI Steering Committee, as well as Bobby Mkangi, former member of the Committee of Experts, as well as constitutional lawyer. I'll start with you, Professor Adam Zalo, because you've been heavily involved in the making of this particular report. One of the stories that we've run has seen, we've seen ODM leader Raila Odinga saying that from this report, if adopted, we will say no to tear gas, we'll say no to violence, we'll say no to maandamano, pretty much saying that there will be no electoral violence if we adopt this. So is this what this report will do?
Well, basically, that is what this report projects to do. If you look at the kind of electoral violence cycle that has been in Kenya since 1992, 1997, 2007, and also 2017, then you can say that the violence came from various forces. The first force, of course, is usually the election management body, in which the election management body has usually been accused of being partisan. But we also know that in 2002, we had a very peaceful election because of an electoral body that was considered to be impartial. So what we are trying to propose in that particular body is to have an election management body that each side, when the result is announced, will be able to say that this result was indeed free and fair. The other issue that we have looked at, basically arising from the 2010 Constitution, is that when we adopted the pure presidential system, which is basically an American model, we kind of forgot our history as a people and our culture and something that is unique to us. And in that sense is that most Africans, and Kenyans included, usually look to their leaders giving them leadership. What has happened in both the 2013 and 2017 elections is that after the presidential election, a leader who leads a very huge chunk of the population and which leads a political party that has so many representatives in the National Assembly and Senate is usually outside, and therefore have to play politics from the outside. So what we are basically trying to do is, can this leader who has a huge chunk of the population, or who has a huge chunk in both the National Assembly and Senate, lead their troops from an institution that is recognized as parliament? We also have looked at times, politics is about who gets what, when, and how. And it's about people looking at election as a cutthroat competition. So how do you disperse who gets what, when, and how, to an extent that the presidency doesn't become the only prize that one looks at? And when you look at devolution, we have increased. We have proposed to increase from 15% to 35%. That will make counties be also a focus in terms of people resolving who gets what, when, and how. If you look at the Ward Development Fund, again, we are saying that each ward becomes the unit of planning of development. So we hope that this multifaceted approach in terms of addressing the cutthroat competition, which basically aligns to politics as the authoritative allocation of resources and values. I've talked about the resources, but you'll also find that we have addressed so many issues insofar as ethics and integrity is concerned, the ethos, the responsibilities of citizens, and the like. So we think that that rubric, if there is goodwill from Kenyans, should give us a solution.
You've mentioned a number of issues that you say this report was set to cure, and especially around electoral violence. Mkangi, some of the proposals in this particular report have been there before, from the Bomas draft, before what many like to term as, before it was mutilated by politicians. I don't know what your initial thoughts are on some of the proposals that have been made, and especially on the structure of governance.
As I said earlier this morning during a show on KTN, And as Professor said, there are some proposals which are very positive. He's talked about the increase of the threshold that counties should receive every year. We had Vijana's very happy with the Youth Commission, the attempt to inbreed gender parity within the parliamentary structure. And broadly, the administrative and policy matrices that the report has provided. And as you mentioned, so many of these proposals have been there before. They have been within our historiography. And so it goes to show that a lot of what the report has presented is particularly not novel. It's not new. It's what has been with us. And I go back to the administrative and policy issues that have been proposed to show that if those were put in place and are put in place, we could have the implementation of the Constitution done better. Coming to your question on the system of governance, when you look at the report and when you look at the handshake 9 points, in terms of inbreeding, inclusivity, taming the winner-takes-all facility that we have now. Unfortunately, I feel that the proposals do not meet the threshold of meeting these challenges. First of all, when you look at elections, when you look at politics, Professor talked about cutthroat competition. That is the nature of politics. That is the nature of elections in each and every jurisdiction in the world. And that is why political parties, political formations field candidates from each level of competition nationally so that they can attempt to have a majority, if not all seats, in the different areas of representation and administration. So I think we should disabuse our minds from this notion that at the end of the day, the winner takes all, because I don't think there's anyone who is going to participate or participates in elections with the hope of coming second or third or landing on a certain position that has been provided in the Constitution. When I look at the nitty-gritty of, for instance, the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister in the cabinet and offing from Parliament, we've mentioned that a lot of these has a stemming from BOMAS and also the harmonized draft constitution that we churned out in November 2009. But on a closer look, you discover that even the Prime Minister that has been proposed in this report does not meet the same threshold that attains to those former pronouncements. For instance, it is not categorical that this Prime Minister is the head of government. It seems and looks like it's only a supervisor and an administrative assistant of the president. The Prime Minister does not nominate or appoint, does not even preside or chair over cabinet meetings, but only cabinet committee meetings. So the question is whether this Prime Minister will really be the person heading government in Parliament, other than being the leader of government opposition. On the other hand, the official leader of opposition is very much just a fallback position for the person who loses the presidential election. That's how it seems. And again, just providing one position, and as we say, resourcing it, giving it a budget, probably having a motorcade and bodyguards. I don't think that suffices in ensuring that there is inclusivity and especially from those who voted for that leader. And I think what they want more. Right. And I think the Prof talked about it is in terms of resources.
Yes, and we'll get to that. And we'll get to that. Thank you. And we'll get to that shortly. You raised very fundamental points that I've seen from those who've reacted to it today, those who've reacted even on social media, Professor Olo, saying that we are seeking to make politicians happy when we are creating all these positions, does this really mean inclusivity? And while at that, are we then going back to the days of an imperial president? Is that what this report has created?
First, let me say that we are not going back to an imperial president, to the extent that if you look at the positions that have been created, they are kind of bringing checks and balances to this particular president. And let me disabuse Kenyans of the notion that I think Bobby talked about it, about the prime minister being the alpha and omega of inclusivity. If you look at our general elections from 1992 when we returned to multipartyism, it is only in 2007, because of the dispute that was there that we all know of, that you had the person who was elected as the president not having the majority seats in the National Assembly, or his or her coalition not having the majority seats. So out of 6 elections, it is only one that was an anomaly. And you'll therefore find that under the system that we are proposing, there is a high likelihood that both the president and the prime minister will come from the same party. So I think let's disabuse ourselves of that notion that the prime minister will go to the opposing party automatically. That is not true. But I think that based on what you have asked on the question of the imperial presidency and on the question of satisfying politicians, I think, again, there has been a lot of talk on this report, more on the governance system. I think, Akisa, you people have the report now. We have so many issues. There are 9 thematic areas. And if you look at all that has been said about shared prosperity, all that has been said about devolution, all that has been said about corruption, all that has been said about empowering the youth, all that has been said about prompt payment of bills so that people don't delay getting what they have provided to the government, all that has been said about data protection under the Bill of Rights.
Yes, Professor.
All those are there.
Yes, Professor, and we've talked about that. Even yesterday we looked at a number of these things, but from where you sit as a vice chair of this committee, what was the intention of giving the president the kind of influence and power that we have from these proposals?
Well, the kind of power that the president gets is because the president is directly elected by the people, and the people are giving him the mandate to go and implement his policy manifesto, and therefore it's only the president that nationally has a direct mandate from Kenyans to conduct the affairs of government on their behalf. If we had gone a pure parliamentary system, then that would be a little bit different, because then you'd be voting for a party only and not necessarily voting for an individual. If you go to South Africa, for example, they call their head of state and head of government a president, but it's basically akin to a prime minister, because they have a pure proportional system in which you vote for political parties, and the parties with the majority therefore form government. If you go to the US, they have a direct election, but you find that whoever becomes the president is not the president based on the popular vote, but is the president based on the electoral college votes given their history. So you have to look at each country's unique history, and we felt that in Kenya, the people have always wanted to vote for their president directly, therefore that is where the power is centered in. Yeah.
I'd like us to take a break in 2 minutes, but Bob, before you say that perhaps you don't agree with what we've set as a threshold for inclusivity, and some of these proposals that have been made have been there before in a committee that you've sat in. So what would you have liked to see this committee done differently or do differently?
I think, and especially as Professor says, there are many issues that have been addressed from the 9 points, but we have to remember that it's a system of governance that is the sticking point. It's the foundation of it all. Kwame Nkrumah said, "Seek ye first the political kingdom, and the rest shall follow." So that is why Kenyans are keen on this governance structure, because that's where everything bleeds from. I think we should have seen a better address of how the different seats, if we are going to say we have inclusivity, then probably we should have gone the Singaporean way, like what they did in voting the current president, Halima Yacob, in reserving, apart from stating that certain seats, and that's why I think Kenyans are reading too much into this, that these are seats that are reserved for certain people. But I think we should have demarcated properly how these various seats are going to infuse inclusivity, because depending on how political formations are, depending on how political parties fashion their message and their manifestos. And Professor said, yes, at one point we had a president who did not command a majority in parliament. So it can happen again, but that is not even the big issue. The big issue is that you could have a political formation, you could have a political party that is able to command a majority and still sort out seats the way we have been seeing it. So we have not seen any categorical pronouncement as to how the MOUs and the agreements and the alliances that we've been seeing that do not cater for and include all Kenyans.
Okay.
Still, this would be very, very possible.
All right,
if I may mention something to do with the elections, yes, IEBC, the structure, and in ensuring that we have a better representation. But for me, I don't think that having IEBC commissioners who've been nominated by parliamentary political parties fits the bill. We are in the current mess with IEBC commissioners because of this.
Bobby,
and also...
I want you to hold on to that thought, Bobby. I'd want you to hold on to that thought. When you get back from a break, we'll start from that point on this particular issue. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back with more.
Over the years, the Rift Valley basket